Hey, this is Harry, and I'm super excited to share with you the first video of many throughout my entire trip. Please bear with me because it's the first time I'm ever making a video, and that includes editing, looking at angles, the whole thing. Think about it as my first prototype. So please feel free to provide any feedback and let me know if you feel like anything will help with creating a better experience for you. So yeah, as this is my first video, I want to break down the flow of how all my videos are gonna go. So for the first section of the videos, I'm gonna go through where I am, what I intended to learn from each location, and also what I ended up learning from each location and the perspective that I gained. And I want to say that this is going to only be my perspective from an outsider point of view, and there is probably more perspectives that can be gained, but this is only what I gained within my time there. The second section is going to be it's going to be where I share a interview with you. It's going to be an interview about the project cycle and perspective from someone in that particular country. And I'm really excited to share this with you because the person who did this project is really cool. He faced a lot of obstacles along the way, and he's going to walk us through his project, the steps, and the story. And for the last section, it's going to be a question and answer section where I'm going to collect questions from all the viewers and choose the top 3 or 4 to share in the videos. Sorry about the noise. There's a bunch of sand buggies in the sand dunes right now. So yeah, that's the flow of the videos. Let me know if you think anything could be better, but that's how the videos are gonna flow. So let's begin. I'm in Peru now. I've been here for about a month and a half now, and in this time I visited 4 main communities to gather my perspective and report Viewpoint. The first location is Cusco. It was once the capital of the Incan Empire. Now it is the gateway for all tourism, or a lot of tourism, going to Machu Picchu. And that has greatly affected the culture, the communities, and the lifestyle of the people living there. The second location is a place called Chawai, and it is a small town outside of Cusco, a little outside of Cusco. And this is where I transitioned from, more developed lifestyle to learning more about developing lifestyle. And for me, I've traveled a lot in the past, but I've actually never been to a developing country before, so this entire thing was a new experience, and that is where the first transition occurred. The third location is a farm called Kasaipunku, and this is in the province of Masca, which is a little outside Pisac. And this is also my first time experiencing farm life and seeing the traditional way of growing plants, the farm-to-table experience, the whole thing, and I'm really excited to share with you that aspect. The fourth part was my last stop to a eco-yoga village, and these are spread out across Peru and around the world, but it is where I felt globalization helped not only share ideas from around the world, but unite people under the same ideas. Okay, so those are the 4 regions which I collected perspective, and when I first came to Peru, and the main reason why I chose Peru was because I wanted to see how globalization affected the developing country and the people and the lifestyle. And before coming to Peru, my ideas on globalization were very limited. I only knew that there was a lot of tourism in Peru, and that this in a way would affect the culture, the lifestyles, and the people. So that's all I knew. But coming in, I wanted to make sure that I was open and that I come in with an open mind, open heart, so that I can absorb all the knowledge that I can gain without preconceived judgments on what globalization was. So, what I learned. So, at least up until now, my perspective on globalization is one that it is inevitable. And this is because developed countries are going to continue developing, and they're going to want to spread their wings and reach out to different regions of the world, maybe for resources, for spreading culture, for foreign aid, for any particular reason. And advancement of technology is going to lead us there. Technology and, I guess, a society. So what I can share are the pros and cons that I've learned from each location, and it will be the summary of what I learned about globalization. So for the pros, the first pro I would say is the sharing of beliefs, culture, lifestyle of different places around the world with different ideas, the sharing of this and the inner exchange of this. I think this is very beautiful because as we learn and gain more perspective, we start questioning things. We start questioning, is this way of thinking correct? Is this way of thinking the absolute right way? And if it's not, you start changing or molding your own perspectives about things. The second pro, I would say, is it's connected to the first aspect, but it's the exposure to people from all around the world. Exposure meaning getting to know others, getting to know others with an open heart and open mind, because I think that's very important, because the more we learn, the more we see that we're not that different from one another. We're actually very similar. And I think this builds and grows empathy, which I think is very important in creating racial equality and just equality overall. The third pro, I would say, is when there are communities that don't necessarily have all the basic needs for everyone, whether it be food, access to clean water, a shelter over their heads, or access to education. These communities can now have foreign aid to help them gain access to these needs. And one point I want to make here is, well, it will be linked in the cons section actually. So let's jump into the cons. The first con is going to be related to advancement of any technology in general, or advancement in technology or change in general, and that is the learning curve with every change or transition. With globalization, the learning curve occurs perhaps when, in many ways, but one way is the loss of some part of culture. And one example of this, or one analogy to this, is when immigrants travel to the US or a developed country, and they initially hold their traditions, but as generations pass, more things are lost throughout time. And this happens with globalization. The second con, I would say, is very similar, related to the first one as well. And this is when the new generation of children and people of that country, community, when they actually yearn to transition, or yearn to accept and embody the new modern society or culture. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but with that, comes some loss of culture, or even embarrassment or shame of the previous culture. And one example of this is I spoke to a few people in the indigenous community who did move to the bigger cities, and one thing that they talked about was, well, two things. Well, the first thing is going to be the discrimination they felt when going to these new cities, because if they did not change into this modern way, and if they held their indigenous roots, they were actually seen less than modern culture, and they were discriminated against. They were made fun of, bullied, even told to go back, similar to how immigrants were in developed countries. The second thing is how the new generations, the kids, they all yearn to move to the cities. They will all want to leave their hometowns to go to the new cities and start their life there and actually settle down there. So that's the second thing. Third would be similar to what I mentioned earlier about the foreign aid and the introduction of these new ideas and products. And this is where these new developed countries introduce ideas or products without consideration to the impacts at times. And I'll provide an example of this. At the farm that we went to, Kasai Punku, the owner and person who started the farm, the project, he talked about how the introduction of plastics was incredibly difficult and different for that community. And this is because at first plastic was thought to be this amazing new magical product that was in all these developed advanced societies, and it was this material that could last much longer, could take the form of anything you want. It did not break as easily, it did not shatter, and it was this magical new material that they now use to package everything and use for a lot of their day-to-day products. And what happened was that the learning phase and the transition was that these indigenous communities were actually used to organic materials before, and with organic materials you can use whatever you wanted, you could eat whatever you wanted, you can have whatever you had. When you were done with it, you would throw it out, and this material would decompose back to the earth, just become one with the earth again. But with this new material, this magical plastic material, it doesn't decompose. As we all know, it has to be recycled now. But these communities did not know that. So they treated plastic like they did their organic material, and they would throw it out, they would throw it on the floor, and they would feed compost to the animals, and they didn't see the material decomposing. They saw their animals changing, getting sick from the plastics, and there was a learning phase from that. And what he asked of us was that when you go to these new communities, when you go to these indigenous communities or towns, and you see trash everywhere, all on the ground, to not quickly assume and quickly think that these indigenous people that they are dirty, or that they don't care about the earth, but understand that this was part of that learning phase where they were just doing what they were always used to, but it was with this introduction of new materials that they grew this habit that there's trash everywhere because the material won't decompose. So to kind of see the other side, the other perspective of things. And so yeah, that was one example of where there is a learning curve, and that you need to be conscientious of that. So, pros and cons. I need to wrap this up quickly. This video's going to be way too long. In conclusion, I would say, as a summary for my thoughts on globalization, is since it is inevitable, to really understand. What I would recommend is for developed countries and for international companies or anybody who actually wants to go to these new communities and developing countries to understand and to understand the impacts of what they're doing in these communities, and to help with the transition, to help with the learning phase of whatever you're introducing into the country. And I guess to end this, I will tell one more story, and it relates to mining. In Peru, one of the biggest aspects affecting indigenous communities now is mining. A lot of companies from around the world, Switzerland, China, Canada, the US, everyone is wanting to get their hands on mining here and the resources here. And what happens is they come here and mining occurs, all these trucks come, all the mining and they kind of work with the government and they work with the communities to create ways for them to have access to these products, with whether it's giving money or exchange of some sort. But what they don't realize, or perhaps they do realize, but it's not as important to them, is the fact that with mining, a lot of things are happening with the water. A lot of the water around the mining regions are being contaminated, whether it is from the minerals or with the trucks going back and forth on these dirt roads, throwing these new minerals into the water. Areas, and this causes a lot of sicknesses to these communities, and they wonder why, and they realize that it's the water that's coming from it. So yeah, I would say when developed countries and communities are planning to help or reach out to exchange or trade with these new communities, to really be conscientious of the impact of whatever they're doing and how it's affecting the local lifestyle and helping with the transition, because I think that's really important. So okay, so that is what I learned with Globalization. If you have any questions, please send them to me and I would love to answer them. Now let's jump into the next section, which is going to be awesome, and I know you all love and fall in love with Arcadio because he's a great person, the project breakdown section. Thank you for listening.